Good. So my name is Caroline Biggs. I'm on the mass communication team. And I just wanted to talk a little bit with you about your career path and kind of any advice that you have for mass communication students at Texas State.
Sure.
There's going to be a wide range of people listening to this, from freshmen who aren't really too sure on what they want to do, and seniors graduating this semester. So, do you want to start by introducing yourself?
Sure, sure. And so we're recording, right?
Oh, yes, we are. Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. Yes, I'm Katie Harvey. I am a proud Bobcat. I graduated in 91, I believe. And I am the CEO and founder of KGB Texas. We are one of the largest woman-owned communications firms in Texas. And we have offices in San Antonio and in Houston for the last 26 years. The kind of the thing I think that makes us different, and what I'm very proud of, is that our sole driver is that we work on initiatives and on brands that have consequence in the community. And so that really differentiates ourselves, I think, from the work that we do. We work on things like infrastructure projects, the transit system, getting things passed on ballot initiatives and those types of things that have positive impact in the community.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's so great to get to talk with you. It's actually funny. I think you might have spoken to my class last semester with Charles Kaufman, PR campaign. So I'm really excited to get to actually talk with you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I always love talking to students and talking to classes. I think I'm doing the campaigns class again this year. I love being able to share experiences with folks and share insight and just be as helpful as I can possibly be, because there are so many people that have been helpful to me along my journey.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that because I definitely can use all the help that I can get. So do you want to talk a little bit more about your transition from college to your work life a little bit?
Sure.
It's
Well, it's not a glorious story. It's a story that has a lot of rocky places in it. But even when I was in college, I always enjoyed being out and working. I was fortunate enough to work with a former Heisman Trophy winner and NFL Hall of Fame UT football player, Earl Campbell. A
oh my
lot of folks
gosh.
are probably going to be too young to remember who Earl Campbell is,
I'm
but he was a superstar. And so I got to work with him when I was in college, helping with his football camps, helping him with his endorsements and those types of things. So it really gave me a an outside perspective in addition to my textbook learnings. But then when I graduated, I was very naive. And I really, because at the time I really wanted to do PR in the NFL. And so there was a professional football team here in San Antonio. It wasn't an NFL team, obviously, but it was a professional team. And so I accepted a job in their communications department. And I was very naive and did not ask them exactly how much they were going to pay me. And so when I moved all my stuff to San Antonio, I realized that it really wasn't enough to survive on. And so I had to figure out how to make ends meet. And so I actually started working for this nonprofit, and you go door to door, knocking on the door, and you got to keep 50% of what you collected. And I remember walking around at 9 o'clock at night in the neighborhoods going, I have a degree. Why am I here? Um, but then, things started falling in line and those types of things. And I went to work for an athletic shoe company. And then about a year into it, I really realized I wanted to do my own thing. So when I started KGB Texas, my company now, I was 24 years old.
Oh
So I was young, but
wow. Very young.
when you're 24, you don't have mortgage, you don't have children, you don't have all this, all these things that you're responsible for. And I came from a very entrepreneurial family and a very supportive family. And so my parents in my family never told me, no, you can't do that. They always said, do whatever you want to do and be fierce and set the world on fire.
Yeah, that support system can be so important sometimes with just leading you in the right path.
It can.
Well, is there anything you would have done differently to prepare? I mean, you started so young, but is there anything that like you think would have helped you more?
Yeah, I do. I went through the path in the university with with mass communications,
Mhm.
and in running a business, it is so important that you understand the business side of things, the finance side of things, and I do wish that I had taken some more finance courses, taking some more business administration courses, and then, the entrepreneurial studies class that, or I'm not even sure if it's just a class, but the entrepreneurial studies program that I've gone back and talked at is a fantastic pathway as well. So, if in hindsight, I probably would have chosen the same path, but I would have sprinkled in some more marketing, finance, business administration, and entrepreneurial studies. But I mean, we have two children, and I have one that's a freshman in college right now. And, I just remember being the age, of a freshman, sophomore, and I didn't know what I really wanted to do. And I know it's so challenging now because you're asked to make those decisions very early and choose those paths very early. So, you know, as I've told my son, take a business course, take a marketing course, take finance, so you can kind of figure out what feels, like the best place to be.
Yeah, that's great advice. That's what I personally was undecided until my junior year. I knew I wanted to do something in the mass communication realm, but I didn't really know. And so I printed out all of the majors, took a class in every single one until I found PR and realized that I really liked that.
Yeah, and PR today is not what PR was when I was in
Mhm.
college, for example. Our platforms between paid and earned and shared are so interwoven and so interconnected that it used to be so cut and dried, and it's just a very different opportunity now, from a PR and communications standpoint of everything being led by strategy. And that's really what the folks at my company, that is one of the most important elements of what I look for in someone is critical thinking.
Mhm.
Because if you can't think critically and you can't connect dots, you cannot be an effective communicator. Because at the end of the day, we're trying to connect with audiences with a message that resonates. And you have to be able to think critically to develop the message that resonates and figure out how to connect with your audiences.
Definitely. That's very good advice that I feel like a lot of the time you don't really think about. I mean, you do that you should be thinking critically, but I feel like it's kind of an afterthought for at least me. Um, well, what has been your biggest accomplishment in your career, would you say?
My kids, and
Oh,
it's not my career, but it's children. It's my kids. Biggest accomplishment ever. I think from a business standpoint or a career standpoint, I think building a leadership team and the leadership team that I have today, and watching them really just grow my company and be successful and bring up folks that are on the team, and just watching people thrive. And especially right now in 2020, 2020 was a grueling year
Mhm.
for business.
Yeah.
And so many people lost their jobs, so many companies have gone bankrupt. It's just been a grueling year, business wise, emotionally, all of those things. And my leadership team has dug in and stepped up every single day with me, alongside me, to lead this company and keep all of our people employed, all of our benefits in place, And that is not an easy task. And that's, I think, probably what I'm most proud of, is watching this leadership team through this pandemic.
Yeah. I think that's something that you could have never expected. And so it's
No.
great that, y'all are striving through it. How kind of like would you recommend for students like who are graduating and going into the workforce right now? Do you have any like recommendations for them on what to do?
Yeah, and I recognize too, I feel so bad for, graduates that are going into the work field, workplace right now, because it's very challenging times for companies on hiring freezes and those types of things. But what I would say is make connections. I mean, just for example, if you want to live in Austin, or you want to live in San Antonio, find resources, find someone who you know, or who, a friend of a friend knows, reach out to them. And, I think people would be surprised about how willing executives are to help folks who are looking for jobs, to make connections in the community. I mean, I get calls and I get emails all the time, and I always make time for people because people made time for me.
Mhm.
And it's very, it is amazing how much easier it is to get noticed in a pool of hundreds when you have someone that sends an email that says, hey, this is someone that I am aware of, and will you take a look at their resume? And that alone sets you apart from others. But, look for connections, look for a mentor. And then I think too, people ask, what are the traits that you're looking for? Or, what are the traits that you're looking for when you're hiring? I think the biggest trait that I look for, and we look for as a company, is curiosity. If someone, particularly in our communications field, doesn't have deep curiosity of reading about what's going on in the world, what's going on in our country, our state, and our community, then they're not going to be successful. Because you have to, again, going back to what I had said, you have to be able to connect dots and learn how to make something newsworthy or capitalize on something that's in the news. So curiosity, and then just initiative. Um, Initiative is so important when, someone's coming to the, someone is new in an organization. You don't want to have to be asking them to do X, Y, and Z. You want them to be saying, I've already done X, Y, and Z. What else can I do?
Yeah,
So I think curiosity and initiative is extremely important.
definitely. Those are great things to think of. And I mean, to just kind of strive to work towards, especially with everything going on in the world right now. I feel like it's a little easier to be curious about, what all is happening. And so that's great to have in mind for right now.
Right.
Um, So, how has the industry changed since you have kind of been in the field? That's kind of a hard question for this year because I know it's changed so much, even just within the year. But how has it kind of changed?
It's changed drastically. When I first started the company, you basically had to worry about, or you had to communicate on platforms of, radio, television, print, and outdoor. That was it. And so it was pretty easy. And so as we moved into a digital space, we have been able to hyper target messages. We have been able to serve up specific messages to specific audiences. I mean, it's gotten to where you really can find a needle in a haystack with communications the way that it is now. Also, the blending of paid and earned and shared. I mean, we work so much with influencers now, and some of that is organic influencers, some of it is paid. Same thing with social. You've got the organic side of social, but then we also have the paid element of social. And so the lines of the lines in communications have really, really blurred. And that's why even at the agency, we don't have public relations, public relations teams, advertising teams. We have brand managers and then those teams built around them, because it's not in a silo anymore. We go and we create the content, and then we slice it up depending on what platform we're trying to interact with our audiences with. And I will say too, and this is kind of my soapbox, but I also think that we have to be very careful on how we communicate and the responsibility that we have as marketers.
Mhm.
If any of you have watched The Social Dilemma, and if you haven't watched it, you should watch it, and it should terrify you, because it's very real. It is happening, and it has already had such an impact on the divisiveness of our country. And all of those things that they talk about in that documentary are very true. And it is an industry that is financially capitalizing on dividing us as people and losing the human connection that we have. And that's just one thing that, people ask me, so what do you think about social media? And I always say it's what we do for a living, but I also think we're going to look back in time in history and say that this was the most disruptive and dangerous thing that we had, as a country, as a society. And I think we just have to, as marketers, be very cautious on how we utilize those platforms.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny. I actually just watched The Social Dilemma within the past month, and it terrified me, and it really made me think, like, oh my gosh, this is the field that I'm going into. That's very scary. That, it just was very eye opening, that I knew a lot of what was going on, but just seeing it in that way just was kind of an eye opener, that it's something to keep in mind when, approaching the fields.
It is, and that's kind of why, going back to really what we focus on as an organization, of working on things that have positive consequence in the community. So I feel good about using the platforms as we use them, and those types of things. But also as a parent, and also during these times, during the pandemic, when there's so much
Mhm.
and people using their social media, and just the negative impact it can have on further isolation and loneliness, and even even as much as of just suicides and those types of things, because we are alone. um but anyhow, I just yes,
Yeah,
yes.
definitely. Well, to kind of get into a more of a positive side, what has been kind of your favorite assignment or kind of, projects that you've worked on in your industry?
I think recently my favorite has been working with VO Metropolitan Transit, which is our transit authority. And we have worked over the last 4 years to educate the community on the need to invest in our transit system.
Mhm.
And it all kind of came to a vote on this November, where we put on the ballot to invest 1/8 of a cent into the future of transit. I think it's been, it was one that was challenging, because we were on a path of educating the public on the need for the 1/8 cent sales tax. Everything was great, and then we ran smack into COVID,
Mhm.
and we had to pivot messaging. We had to really focus on making sure that our essential workers understood that we were going to get them where they needed to go safely. We were going to protect our drivers as well. And then coming, kind of on the other side of it, ramping up to educate for this ballot initiative in November. And all along the way, we had indication that we would have, support for the initiative, but we passed the initiative on Tuesday with a 68% approval rating. So that was really exciting, of doing something that will change our historically underfunded transit system
Mhm.
in San Antonio to be something that, will have a positive impact on our community for years and years to come.
Yeah, that's so exciting. I'm from San Antonio, and so I went in town to vote this week, and so that's very exciting.
Good, good.
um, going into that, like, what kind of just for like people wanting to go into the PR field, what does like a day to day life look like for you?
Sure. Um, we have probably at any given time 30 clients, 40 clients that we're working on in the San Antonio and Houston office. And it's a combination of strategic development, um, tactical execution, client interaction, client communication, and especially during COVID, when so much of our interaction has been over Zoom, I think we probably have communicated more than what we used to do in the past, just because we migrated over to Microsoft Teams before the pandemic. And so we were already set up to be able to, communicate with each other, share documents, those types of things.
That's great.
And so, I think that we have weekly check-ins on each one of the accounts to ensure that, the strategy is there, especially right now. Right now, we are knee deep in planning for 2021 for all of our clients. So we're sitting down with them and just going through the plans for 2021, which look a lot different than the plans that we had, in 2019 going into 2020.
Yeah.
But it's again another piece of advice that I would give if someone has an interest in going in to PR and communications, either on the agency side, and it doesn't necessarily have to be on the agency side, but I think it's a great guide. It's a book called The Art of Client Service. And it really just talks about how you manage a client's business. And that could be even if you're working for, a company and you have internal constituents and those types of things. It's really helpful. And each one of the folks that join the agency at KGB get one on their first day when they join, and it's definitely required reading.
Oh, well, that is great to hear and great advice. So what advice do you have for students who are kind of on the internship or job hunt, more so internship, of like what best ways to look and to find?
That's tough right now because your internship landscape is very different. Some companies that typically do offer internships are not right now. And if they are, they're pretty much online.
Mhm.
Again, what I would do is, take a look at even, the business journals in the major markets produce a book of lists, and you can look at the book of lists and find out, contacts, the businesses, et cetera. Reach out to someone there. The other thing is, find out what agencies there are in the community that you are living in or you want to go to, and reach out to them, just on their website and inquire about internships, and then see if you can find a way to make a connection to someone there, because it's a lot of, who do you know, and, who can put you in touch with the right person. But I do highly, highly encourage internships, because looking at resumes when we have an entry level position, we always look for folks that have gone above and beyond their studies.
Mhm.
And some of those are students that have participated in student-led agencies, and I think Texas State has one. I think you're working with HP, right? Or I think HP is a client for the PR agency.
Mhm.
AAF is another, working on real life projects and outside of the university on initiatives, and having that experience is really important to set someone apart from the whole pack.
Mhm. Definitely. Um, And then my last question, what kind of future predictions do you have for the field? Like, what do you think is the next thing? We kind of talked about the social dilemma, but like, what do you think is going to happen next?
So I'm actually going to kind of go against everything and all of the platforms, et cetera. I think what you're going to see is a shift back to human connection, a shift away from so much technology centered discussions and driving brands. I think that with what has happened with Black Lives Matter, what has happened in looking at the lens of equity within brands and organizations, and really people holding brands accountable more so than ever in the past, of what are you doing for the community, what are you doing for the environment, for the earth, for all these different things. But I know that at South by Southwest a few years ago, I think it was the last South by before they had to, before last year, there was a huge focus on human relationships and less focus on all the techie stuff that has always been there. So I think that that is something that we will continue to see, and I hope that we do. And how people react to that and how brands react to that will be extremely important.
Well, thank you so much, Katie. This has been so fun to get to hear your perspective on it and so much advice given that I just
Good.
appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And if any, if anyone who is participating has questions or have other, things that they would like to ask or what have you, my email is Katie, it's Katie at kgbtexas.com, and feel free to email me.